You've probably heard the term serverless thrown around a ton in the tech world. It's this idea that's really fundamentally changing how we build things in the cloud. But, what does it actually mean? Let's break it all down. Okay, let's just start with a simple question. Picture this. You're a developer. What if you could spend 100% of your time just writing amazing code, solving real problems for your users, and you never, ever had to think about managing a server, patching a server, or scaling a server again? That right there is the core promise of serverless.
Now, to really get why this is such a game changer, we have to look back at the old way of doing things. The source material calls them the ops headaches, but I like to think of it as the old server headache. For decades, if you wanted to build an application, you kind of had to be a systems administrator on the side. You had to deal with all of this stuff, physically managing servers, trying to guess how many you'd need, that's capacity planning, doing all the constant maintenance, and here's the kicker, paying for those servers to be running 24/7, even when no one was using your app. And then when a huge traffic spike came out of nowhere, it was all hands on deck, hoping things wouldn't crash.
So, that whole pile of worries is exactly what pushed the industry towards what we're calling the serverless shift, just a totally new way to think about building software.
So what is it really? Well, put simply, serverless is a model where the cloud provider, your Amazons, Googles, Microsofts, they handle all of the infrastructure for you. They manage it, they scale it, they maintain it. As a developer, your only job is to upload your code. That's it.
And this comparison just makes it crystal clear. Look at the left side. The traditional model is just cluttered with all these operational jobs. But now look at the right. In the serverless world, what's left for the developer? Just writing code. They get to focus on what actually matters, creating cool features, not just keeping the lights on.
This shift in focus unlocks some absolutely incredible benefits. And they really boil down to two main things, which brings us to our next section, power and price, the two core advantages of going serverless.
All right, let's kick things off with the first major advantage. And honestly, this one is probably the most powerful of them all. And that is automatic scalability. What does that mean? It means your application can handle a sudden rush of 1 million users just as easily as it handles a single user, without you having to do anything. The cloud platform just adds or removes resources on its own, completely behind the scenes.
This chart shows it perfectly, right? When traffic is low, use a tiny bit of resources. When traffic goes through the roof, the platform instantly scales up to meet the demand. But here's the most mind-blowing part. Look at that third bar. When there's no traffic at all, your resources scale all the way down to zero. You're using nothing.
As the source material puts it, this just completely gets rid of the guesswork. You don't have to do any capacity planning, and you don't risk over-provisioning, which is just a fancy way of saying you're not paying for a bunch of server power you don't actually need.
And that amazing ability to scale all the way down to zero, well, that leads us directly into the second huge benefit of going serverless.
And it's all about the cost model. With serverless, you truly, and I mean truly, only pay for what you use. You are not paying for a server to just sit there idle. If your code runs for 100 milliseconds, you get a bill for exactly 100 milliseconds of compute time. For a lot of applications, this can make them ridiculously cheaper to run. So, infinite scalability and a pay-per-millisecond model. It kind of sounds perfect, right? Like the solution to every problem? Well, not so fast. It's not quite magic. And like with any piece of tech, there are always trade-offs you've got to consider.
So, let's get a balanced perspective here. It's time to talk about the real trade-offs, the stuff you really need to think about before you jump headfirst into a serverless project. There are basically 3 big challenges to keep on your radar. First is something called cold starts. That's a tiny delay on the very first request after your function has been idle for a while. It has to wake up. Second, observability can get tricky. When your app is made of hundreds of tiny functions, it can be harder to see the big picture and figure out what went wrong. And finally, there's vendor lock-in. That's where you get so tied into one cloud provider system that switching to another one becomes a huge, expensive headache. Okay, so we've seen the incredible power and we've talked about the important trade-offs. This brings us to the final, really practical question, when to go serverless? Because at the end of the day, it's about using the right tool for the right job. And the key takeaway is this. Serverless isn't some kind of silver bullet you should use for everything. It's a strategic choice. It works best when you use it intentionally for the things it's great at, while you keep its weaknesses in mind.
And this final quote really just sums it all up perfectly. For things like APIs, for processing data, for any task that needs to be lightweight, super fast, and crazy scalable, serverless is an incredibly powerful choice for building modern apps.
Which leaves us with one big question to chew on. We've seen how it can completely eliminate that old server headache, but we've also seen its trade-offs. So, is serverless the future for all applications, or is it just one more powerful tool in the toolbox? Honestly, that's something the entire industry is still figuring out right now. Thanks for joining me on this explanation.